Ah, welcome to Faith and Count. This is class number 208. Excuse the sunglasses here. I just got back from the eye doctor, so put the drops in. So I'm trying to look cool here. I thought that would be, All right. So we are pop out of. We just finished Shavuos last week. We had a Shavuos class last week. I have a very short class for today. My wife has some great stories, so hang on. I'm going to try and this is one of the things that I was learning, and I thought that was meaningful, and so I packed it away and said I'm going to save it for our class. And it was last week's parsha, the one we read in shul on Shabbos. It's Parshas. It was Parshas Nasa, and one of the things that it mentions in there is the blessing of the. Let me mute. Yeah. Okay. Let me. Is the blessing of the Kohen Gadol to the Jewish people. What we say in shul, we say it every morning. If you're not there every morning, you certainly hear it on the holidays. And it goes, this famous line, Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er panav elecha v'yichunecha, Yisanai panav elecha v'yasem l'cha shalom. And everybody hides under the talus and everything else and so forth. What does the lines mean? So I was reading from the Alter Rebbe. He said, he brought up a great question. Everybody knows it's great to get blessings and so forth, and to get blessings from the Kohen. But what is he blessing you about? Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. What does that mean? And Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. Why is it? It seems like it's these three separate things that don't seem connected with each other, and it's what is the whole idea of a bracha anyway? So the Alter Rebbe explains the following. He says, when God created humankind, he planted them here in this earth, in order to guard it and to watch it and to do mitzvahs. And when you plant something, plant a seed, for example, put it in the earth. So in a certain way, it's sort of like, you're throwing away good food. How are you allowed to throw away good food? It's actually, it's mentioned in the Torah. You're not allowed to just throw things away or destroy things arbitrarily. And so, if you were just reading the Torah straightforward and you didn't see all the different viewpoints and all the different ways that it connects together, you might think it's not allowed. But of course, we know that we're allowed to do it because farmers do it. And also because what happens is when you plant a seed in the ground, it produces more seeds than there was originally. So you're actually doing it in order to get an increase out of it. And that is what God is basically saying to the Jewish people. He's saying, listen, I am going to I'm blessing you. And because of all the things that you do for me, you do all these mitzvahs in the earth, with the physical, with yourselves, and with the items in the world. And therefore, in response, I am also going to respond to you because you're going beyond yourself. You're nullifying yourself, just like the seed. You're making yourself just a vehicle for me. And because you're not thinking about yourselves and you're thinking about what your mission is, therefore you can be a channel for actually being able to you're not limited to yourself anymore. It's beyond you. It's bigger than you. And when you open yourself up to something that's bigger than you, then God can come into the situation. So that's what God is saying. He says, Yivarechecha Hashem, God is blessing you, and you are going to be able to. Now, sometimes you might think, what, my actions are not very much. I didn't really get that much done today. I really didn't do that much. I didn't take advantage of all those things. So that's what it says, Yisa Hashem. God will lift you up. God is listening, knows our limitations. And he knows that sometimes we miss the mark. And you know what? He lifts you up. He doesn't wait until you actually pay him back equally for what you did. He actually lifts you up, and then he gives you peace. In other words, he's able to actually unite the highest levels of the worlds down to the lowest levels of the worlds. And he's actually able to bring something that normally isn't into the world, into the world. And that is what these blessings are all about. It's about God giving us the capabilities and the energies and the capacity to be able to do something far beyond what we just normally do when we're interested in our just doing it for ourselves. We're actually becoming, and so to say, we're becoming united with part of Hashem, and that's what we're doing. Is we're actually bringing out the godliness in ourselves. When we bring out the godliness in ourselves, it's actually God doing it. So we're not operating on our capabilities. We're not struggling with our problems only according to how much we know and how much we think we're able to do. We're actually able to transform things in a miraculous way, in a godly way. And when God faces issues and when God faces troubles, they all disappear in front of him. So this is also a very important lesson, in a time where the Jewish people are all under stress and under attack. And, and you look at it and you're saying, poor little Israel, how are they going to survive? And the answer is they're surviving not because of them, and not because of their military planners, and not because of their politicians. They're surviving over and over again, and they're doing miraculous things that that really shouldn't be able to succeed. And nevertheless, they're able to do it. And it's because we are a godly people. We just don't know it. And you know what? When we act in a selfless way, we actually act bigger than ourselves. We actually become that channel for actually bringing the godliness into the world. And so I said I would be very short, and Shalana Judas has some great stories to tell us.
Thank you, everybody. And nice to see you. Wow, I haven't seen you for a long time. Hello. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before I begin? Okay, I'm going to begin. So I'll begin with the four things that I always say, which is that number one, we're in a remarkable time. And the reason I say it is because Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was never wrong about any pronouncement that he made, they all came true. He told us that we are in the unfolding of the final redemption. And secondly, you and I, our souls were handpicked to be here at this incredible time period. There's never been as dramatic a time period in my lifetime, and I'm older than probably all of you. So there's never been any time like this in my life. And number three, we were given all the tools we need to navigate this time. We were given the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we were given the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And finally, we are actively advancing the cause of redemption tonight by learning about it. So I want to tell two stories, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to tell two stories. The first story is a story about the Rebbe from 1978, and when the Rebbe tells us that the redemption is unfolding, the analogy has been made to a pilot. A pilot sees things from the air that people on the ground can't see, and the Rebbe sees things that we don't see all the time in individuals' lives, in global things. And so anyway, this is a story from 1978, and it was told by a man who passed away this year. His name is Eliezer Kayan. And in 1978, Eliezer Kayan was a rather young man. He lived in Israel. He was an Am Shenover Chassid. There's a group of Chassidim called Am Shenover in Yerushalayim. And he was on a business trip going to America, going to New York. But he had a 2-day layover from Yerushalayim in Paris. And so did a friend of his, a friend who was going off somewhere else. The friend had a 1-day layover. He had a 2-day layover. And they couldn't sleep, from their flights and the excitement. And they decided to go for a walk on midnight, the first night in Paris. And they went past, they went to the outskirts of town, and they passed by a cafe where there was a lot of activity. And the door was open to the cafe, and there was a man with long silver hair, the shoulder length, shiny silver hair. I mean, natural, but like an older person who was very handsome and very striking. And people were listening like this. They were like enwrapped in what he said. Of course, he was speaking French, so these guys didn't know completely what he was saying. They knew a little French, not much. And they were captivated a little bit by this guy. They thought he was interesting, and they couldn't tell. There was something that interested both of these Hasidim about this guy. Anyway, they went back home, back to their hotel. The other guy the next morning left on his connecting flight, and this guy had one more night in Paris. And again, he couldn't sleep, and he decided around midnight to go for another walk, and he decided to go past that cafe. And again, the guy was captivating a big audience, and he stood outside. He didn't go in. He stood outside and he looked at the guy, and for a second, the guy looked at him, and their eyes met. And the guy with a long silver speaker, the one with the silver, gray flowing, shiny gray flowing hair, calls out, "Farvanet kimt yid." How's a yid? He speaks in perfect Polish Yiddish. What's a yid doing in this area of town? What's a yid doing here? And the guy is like, "Oh, this guy's Jewish? I didn't know that." And and the guy said, "I'm almost done." He finished his lecture and he said, "It's so unusual for me to see a Jew in this area of town. Would you like to come to my house? I have a story to tell you that I think you would be interested in." Now, this guy, the Amshinover Chassid, not used to going to strangers' houses, but he was so curious about this guy. He's obviously a brilliant man, charismatic, and he speaks a fluent Yiddish. What is it? So he decides to go along with him. They get into a black car and they drive and they go through successively more and more expensive neighborhoods until they get to an incredibly posh neighborhood. There are gardens and sweet smells coming through the midnight air. And they go into this guy's house and they come into the guy's never the Amshon Aver Chassid has never seen a house like this. They go into a room that is like beautiful furnishings and the tallest ceilings he ever saw in his life. And then the guy with the long silver hair says, "This is the non-Jewish room." And then he brings him into another room. He said, "This is the Yiddish room. This is the Jewish room." And in that room, wall to wall, rare Jewish svarim, rare Jewish Torah books, and by all the Hasidic masters, by ancient books, modern books, everything. And there was a book of the Torah laws laid out by the Alter Rebbe on the Shulchan Aruch Harav, laid out on one of the coffee tables, packed with incredibly valuable books. And the Amshon Aver Chassid looks around and realizes there's no mezuzahs on these doors. This doesn't make any sense. He has a fortune in books that he's obviously Torah books that he's obviously learning. Is he Jewish? There's not even a mezuzah on the not even a mezuzah on the doors. And so the guy offers him to sit down, and the Amshon Aver Chassid said, does my new friend have a name?" And he said, "Not going to tell you my name. I'm going to tell you something, but I'm not going to tell you my name." And he starts to tell him that, yeah, I love Torah. As you can see, I love learning Torah. I was born to a very Hasidic family, and my parents were so proud of my learning Torah, and I loved learning Torah, and I still do. I loved it. But then the war came. Hitler came. The war came, and it was so horrendous. I think that he lost his most of his family. He lost his parents and all that. And after the war, he was separated from his family, and he was so furious with Hashem that he dropped everything. He dropped absolutely everything, and he made no effort to find other members of his family. And in fact, so anyway, and that's what he said. And as he's talking to the Amshon Aver Chassid, he said, "I want to make a deal with you. I want to tell you something that I have never told anybody since the war. In return, and because I want you to do a favor for me, and so I need to give you this information. Will you do it?" And the Amshon Aver Chassid was so enthralled with this guy already. He really wanted to help him. And he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And they shook hands. So then the guy with the silver hair told him who he was. And the Amshinover Chassid felt chills going up and down his body because this was the son of a super famous, somebody who'd been killed in the war, but a super famous Hasidic Rebbe. He was part of an incredibly important family, incredibly famous, well known, uh, holy, incredible. And and he said, um, so anyway, he said, this is the favor that I want to ask you. None of my family knows that I survived the war, and I don't want anybody to know anything about me. But I want you to do a favor for me. I want you to take, I want you to stay in Paris for another few days so I can prepare something, and I want you to take it to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Amshinover Chassid, he said, he admired the Rebbe, and he said, "Why the Lubavitcher Rebbe? There's so many Rebbes. Why the Lubavitcher Rebbe?" And the guy with the long silver hair proceeded to tell him a story, which I'm not going to tell you, which means you don't really you know you may think you know about people, but you don't know everything. Believe me, I want this only to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And so the other guy agreed. And he visited his new friend every night until he left. And he found out that this guy never married and that he taught, what did he teach? He taught Greek philosophy. And as I said, I think I said this already. He told him that he's so angry and he's been so mad at Hashem that although he learns Torah whenever he can, he doesn't keep a single mitzvah. He doesn't fast on Yom Kippur. He doesn't keep a single mitzvah. And so at the end of 3 days, he gives him a fat envelope, and he said, "I have two conditions for you to keep. Number one, I need number one, I need you to I need you to take this to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I need you to hand it to him directly. And 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 if you can't hand it to him directly, don't give it to anybody. Just don't give it to anybody." So the Amshinover Chassid takes it, and he continues his flight to New York, and he goes very quickly to 770, and this is 1978, and it's several months after the Rebbe had a massive heart attack. Now the Rebbe was back in public by that time, but the secretariat, these four or five rabbis who were the Rebbe's secretaries, they were very protective of the Rebbe. And so when the guy said, "I have to give this to the Rebbe, please, can I have an appointment to see the Rebbe?" They said, "No." Rabbi Groner, Rabbi Groner, one of the secretaries, said, "No, absolutely not. I'll give it to him. I'm very trustworthy. I don't open up the Rebbe's mail. Only the Rebbe opens it." And the guy said, "No, I promise. I can't do that. I can't do that." He came back to 770 on other days again and again and again. And each time Rabbi Groner said, "No, absolutely not. You're not, I'm not giving a private audience. There are no private audiences." So anyway, he was going to give up, and he thought, maybe I should just mail the package back to Paris. And Hashem, whatever, gave him the idea to try one more time. And he tried one more time. And this was on Shva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and he knew, it's a fast day. The Rebbe is it was the Rebbe is it was a fast day that was pushed off to Sunday, and he said, "I know the Rebbe is going to be davening with the congregation," and so he saw Rabbi Groner out of the corner of his eye, and Rabbi Groner gave him a really cold look, like, "Don't you even try to approach the Rebbe." And so he shrank back and he thought, "I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to do it. Whatever. I'm not going to do it." And after davening, the Rebbe came out, and when the Rebbe would move through the Hasidim, they would make a shvil. It would like part like the Red Sea, and the Rebbe would walk through, and and the Rebbe walked through, and it looked like the Rebbe was walking directly towards this guy, and the guy was thinking, "Oh my goodness." And then the Rebbe stopped directly in front of the Amshinover Chassid, and he's staring him straight in the eye like this, and he's not saying anything; he's just staring at him. And finally, the Rebbe said, "No," and the Amshinover Chassid realized Oh, and he took the thing out of his pocket and he gave it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, Adank. And he went off with it. And afterwards, the Amshnaver Chassid called the mysterious silver-haired guy in Paris, and the guy was so happy to hear that the Rebbe got it, and he was so happy to hear that the Rebbe got it, and he was so happy to hear the whole story about how the Rebbe knew that this guy, the Rebbe had never seen this Amshnaver Chassid in his life. The Amshnaver Chassid had never seen the Rebbe in his life, and yet the Rebbe knew he has something for me, and I know it, and he better give it to me. And so anyway, um, the story continues, and he stays in touch with this mysterious person in Paris. The Amshnaver Chassid stays in touch, and he found out that the Rebbe, I guess the Amshnaver Chassid had sent his telephone number and whatever questions about life that he had, and the Rebbe called him directly. And the Rebbe didn't call through the secretaries because the Rebbe understood it is just incredibly important to this man, this guy who gave up the ways of Torah, except he learns Torah. It's important to him to keep his privacy. And so the Amshnaver Chassid, when it came to Yom Kippur, he decided, I know a little bit more about the Lubavitcher Rebbe now. I'm going to go to him for a blessing before Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe would give out lekach, which is honey cake, to people before Yom Kippur and give them a blessing for the year. And so he stood in line, and the Rebbe gave him a piece of lekach, and he went on. And then somebody pulled him by the back of his collar and told him to come back. And they said, the Rebbe has a second piece of cake for you. And he took the second piece of cake, and he knew who it was for. And he wanted to call the guy in Paris before Yantif, but Yantif was like on him. It was approaching. He had no time, and so he tried to call. The next opportunity he had was the intermediary days of Sukkot, and he called and called and called this guy's apartment in Paris, and there was no answer. And there was no answer. And so after the Yanta was over, after Simchas Torah, he called the Sorbonne, where this guy taught, and he said, "I need to talk to one of your professors." And the person on the other line answered in French, "Sir, we have 13 campuses, and we have a lot of professors. I'm not going to be able to track down a professor for you." And she said, okay. She said, "Tell me the name anyway." And he told her the name, and she said, "I actually know where he is." And she said, "Who are you and why do you want to know?" And he explained a little. And she said, "I have bad news. That professor just passed away on the Jewish holiday. He just passed away and he was buried." And she said the name of the place that he was buried. He was buried in a non-Jewish cemetery. And it's a very big deal for a Jew to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. It's huge, huge, huge. And the Amshnaver Chassid was so distraught that his friend is now interred in a non-Jewish cemetery. And he can't even tell his family about it because he can't tell anybody about this guy. He was sworn to secrecy. So he went to his Rebbe, the Amshnaver Rebbe, and he didn't tell him the guy's name. He just told him the story about him. And the Amshnaver Rebbe said, he told him the whole story. And the Amshnaver Rebbe said, "You don't have anything to worry about. The Rebbe is taking care of him. Lubavitch Rebbe is going to take care of this. You have nothing to worry about." And he said, "How do you know?" He just said, "You have nothing to worry about." And indeed, he wanted to go on another trip. He wanted to go see his friend's grave. And he called the Sorbonne to find out the location of the grave. And they said, "Oh, they moved him to a Jewish cemetery." And anyway, so the Rebbe took care of him. So if we wonder about things that the Rebbe says that seem odd, the Rebbe saying the redemption is unfolding, and we see all these strange things happening. The Rebbe sees much more than we see, and just like in Egypt, things were crazy bad right before they got good. They were crazy bad. It's so reminiscent of what's happening now, so reminiscent. And it's said that our redemption is that the redemption from Egypt is a blueprint for our final redemption. So anyway, that's one story. The second story I want to say is about the power. Not everybody keeps all the mitzvahs. And even if you don't keep all the mitzvahs, there's incredible value in.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, yes.
I'm doing work, so I just lost the last end of it. When he went to the campus, who is he looking for? I got lost who he was looking for when he went to the campus, what professor he was looking for.
He was.
I followed the whole story. He gave the specific letter to the Rebbe, like this man had asked him, yeah. And then I'm sorry, I'm doing my work.
He gave the letter to the Rebbe, and then he found out that the Rebbe was after that point, the Rebbe was in phone contact with this guy, and helped him with that whatever like a lot of people.
Right, but what did it have to do with going to the college campus? Who is this person from the college campus?
Okay, he found out he wanted to get in touch with him again, and he couldn't get him on the phone, so he called the campus, and he found out the guy passed away on Simchas Torah.
Wait, he wanted the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted to get in touch with
No.
Amshinover Rebbe wanted to get in touch with
the Amshinover Chassid wanted to get in touch with his friend. He felt he was a friend by now. And
the guy from France?
Yes, he wanted to tell him, I got lekach from the Rebbe for you. And
so he went all the way back to France. Oh, I missed that part.
He called. And he called the Sorbonne in France, and he found out that
sorry.
That's okay. He called the Sorbonne, and he found out that the guy had died. And then on a subsequent trip.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, okay, good.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It's just when I'm working.
Now I'm going to try something, and if it doesn't work, I got this magnificent thing on. It's just an amazing thing on WhatsApp, and
you're a kind soul.
I got an amazing thing on WhatsApp, and I don't know, and I can't download it onto my computer because it's too big a file. And I searched for it all over the internet, and I can't find it. So I'm going to see what it looks like if I try and if this doesn't work, I'm going to tell you the story in my own words. It's a story about the power of one mitzvah.
Of one.
I am Ani Ben Zion, and this is my moment.
No, it's not going to work. It's too much reflection.
הסיפור עם החברה של הבת שלי, היא גדלה בבני ברק.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the story. It's a very dramatic story. So this guy is telling a story. He's from Bnei Brak, and there was a young girl in Bnei Brak, and as is happening so much in our generation, the young generation needs. Why is this going off?
Is that me?
No, it's me. The young generation needs. They need their own genuine connection with Hashem, and they can't take anything that was just handed to them on a platter. And so a lot of young people leave and try and find truth on their own. And there was a young woman in Bnei Brak, and she, in Bnei Brak, her parents were very religious. Her family was very, very religious. And she stopped doing everything. She stopped keeping Shabbos. She stopped keeping kosher. She stopped keeping holidays. She stopped keeping everything. There was only one mitzvah that she didn't stop keeping, and that is dressing modestly. She wore long sleeves. She wore long dresses. She was covered. Yeah, and for some reason that one she didn't give up. And a few days before Simchas Torah this past year, a few days before. She got a call from her friends, because she had many friends who were off the path as well. And they said, there's a fantastic music festival, the Nova Music Festival. Let's go. And she said, no problem. Ein baya. I'm going. She packed a little bag. She went down to the Nova Festival, which, as we know, was on Shabbos and on Simchas Torah, two of the holiest days in the year, right? Combined in one. And she went, and all night there was singing, there was dancing, there was food, and then at 6:30 in the morning, the terrible thing happened. The terrorists came, and many of her friends were murdered. Many of her friends were taken captive, and she threw herself on the ground and she started saying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And she said, Hashem, if you save me, I am going to do complete teshuvah. I'm going to return to your ways in every single way. But please, Hashem, save me from this. And she said it over and over again. Then at one point, there was a terrorist right by her. And he said, and she sees him. She's laying down on the ground. And he says, Geveret, madam, what are you doing here? Oh, you don't belong here. He said, look at you. Look at how you're dressed. Look at how your friends are dressed. Your friends obviously were dressed completely differently. She's the only one who was dressed like she was dressed. You don't belong here. Go, leave. And she said, I can't. I'm afraid of the terrorists. And he said, don't worry. I will go with you. You need to get out of here. You need to go home. Lech baita, go to your house. And he said, I will protect you. And she got up and they walked side by side through all the terrorists. The terrorists saw her with him and they figured he's taking her to Gaza, no problem. And they walked and walked and walked, and he walked her out of the trouble area to a road. And on that road, and he left her and he said, run, run. And she saw a car, a Jewish car. They picked her up and it was Shabbos, Simchas Torah. She said, drive me to my house in Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak is not close to the Nova Festival. And they drove her all the way home. For a solid month, she cried and she could barely talk. And the horrible scenes, her friends murdered, her friends who were taken captive. It's so horrible. And she cried and cried and cried. She kept her promise of doing complete teshuvah. And one day her mother said Tzedekis apparently, and her mother said to her, my darling, that was not a terrorist who rescued you. That was Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi is a prophet who went to heaven alive and comes back to earth and does very interesting things. She said that was Eliyahu Hanavi, and he saved you in the merit of your mitzvah tznius. That's why you were saved, and I believe it. I believe it 100% that Hashem does the most. If you hear the stories, there are individual stories from that. They're just like the hand of God is so incredible. Was so incredible. So every single mitzvah is infinitely valuable and provides infinite protection for a person. And the more, the merrier. They cannot be. The mitzvahs are. They're like a protective shield around a person, and they change a person's life. So they also, as I always love to say, they make you more you than you ever imagined you could become. They make you more. The mitzvahs develop the person. They develop your everything, your confidence, your everything. They bring you out of you. So anyway, with that, we like to keep the classes short lately. I'm going to turn off the recording, and if anybody has questions, I would be happy to hear them.